and in the book of Acts, I believe it says that God has made of one blood all men. This concept of division by what you look like on the outside or by what your ethnicity or where you were born, it's strictly from the pit of hell, keeping people apart from people. It's a wicked lie, and it's a lie that the enemy has used so deeply. So if you're part perhaps of an ethnic group or a racial group, we keep coming back to this idea of forgiveness, and you have been oppressed, or your great grandfather was oppressed and mistreated, you may need to forgive right now in the present, something even from history, and perhaps you were told stories. So I want to move on to this, but I guess the Holy Spirit is prompting that. So it doesn't even have to be something personal. It could be that one tribe was warring with another tribe, and some horrible atrocities, even to this day in India, in other nations, and in Africa, atrocities are taking place. And so forgiveness is no easy thing. You have to call on God. But I guess that seems to be the theme of today. Okay, we all know, give us this day our daily bread, especially, again, in what man would call a third world country. This is a challenge. God knows it's a challenge, but I want you to encourage you to think of when Jesus gave this as part of his initial teaching to his followers, give us this day our daily bread. Remember, they were Jewish. So what did the Jewish mind think when he said daily bread? Of course, they thought of, for those of you who know the Old Testament, the manna coming down daily from heaven. God forbade them to collect too much manna at a time. God forced them to depend on him a day at a time. And if they tried to keep it in that context, now it's different today, but if they tried to keep it over the next day, then it's spoiled. God was teaching them a lesson. I am your God, and you need to depend on me one day at a time. Now that's, if you run a ministry like here in the West, if you run a ministry and you're on television and you're on radio, your daily bread might be $1 million a day. See, it's not about the size. Everybody, it's in the context of the level of influence you have. If God has given you a level of influence where you're on 100 TV stations and, multiple radio stations, and you're putting out all kinds of printed material, your daily bread might be, $2 million a day. It might be that. It doesn't matter what it is. Give us this day our daily bread. But again, the Jewish mind, they went back to the manna that God provided. Look at that. Millions of people out in the middle of nowhere. No water systems hooked up, no sanitation systems for them to go to the bathroom, no farms, none of that. God provided for his people, millions of people out in the middle of nowhere. Some of you don't believe that God can provide for you in the midst of a tough culture. I want to challenge your small thinking. And God's provision is not based on what's going on. Now, the economy is bad everywhere. The economy is even bad here in America. Inflation is high. And when inflation is high, then it eats into wages. And when wages go down, then people tend to give less to the church. I mean, there's ripples all throughout the economy. We all have to trust God. But what the Jewish brothers thought of, again, was the promise from Deuteronomy 8:18. And I want to give this promise out to you, brothers. I want some of you to write this down, because you need to go back. I'll read it to you, but some of you need to write this down and go back and perhaps look at it in 4 or 5 different versions. This is what God urged the people of Israel. He said, when things go good, do not pat yourself on the back. I'm paraphrasing, of course. Don't take credit for it. He told them, he admonished them